Well, I mean, the penny has dropped, hasn't it? I mean, uh, the dynamics have changed. I've said it many times. Social media has changed the ability of the Zionists and the ability of America to control the narrative. Everyone can see the lies, the endless, blatant, uh, embarrassingly sloppy lies of the Zionists. These are things that the whole world has always known, actually. You know, even without access to information, even with a controlled narrative, the wider world has always known because the wider world is intimately familiar with colonialism and how it works. And of course, that includes being intimately familiar with the pathological dishonesty and deception of colonial powers, the necessary deception. So everyone outside of the West has always known and has always understood the real nature of the Israel Palestine conflict, the Israel Palestine situation. That's why every United Nations General Assembly vote goes against Israel every time, because the General Assembly represents global opinion. It's the Security Council that represents the West. And the West has always gotten away with calling itself, without the slightest self consciousness whatsoever, the West calls itself the international community, which just means really the colonizer community. That's what international community translates to. It's just a euphemism. It's a euphemism for the colonial powers. That's what they mean when they say international community. They mean the colonial powers. But the rest of the world, you can say the historical victims of the so-called international community, they know exactly what that community does, what that so-called international community does. They know what they support. They know what they really believe in. They know what their agenda is. And they know all the lies that they tell to make it look like they're not criminals. The legitimate global community knows and always has known the racist, oppressive, genocidal, violent nature of Zionism and the supporters of Zionism. This isn't news to anyone outside the West, but it is finally dawning on Westerners, and that is new. I mean, it's a little bit startling, frankly, to see how wildly bad the Zionist propaganda is. It's like they don't know that the internet is a thing. They haven't kept up to date. I mean, showing an AI-generated image of a burned baby, like no one could check that? You didn't think about that? I mean, this by itself should cause a huge exodus of investors from Israel's tech sector. It's embarrassing. These ridiculous claims about beheaded babies, about rapes and mutilations. Like you can just say any sensational, outrageous thing, and you think that people are just going to believe it. They're just going to go along with it without any substantiation. You believe that, you think that way because that's how it used to be. Because you're so out of touch with how things have changed. The people who subscribe to the idea of, believe all Israelis, well, that population is shrinking by the hour. And it doesn't help that you keep telling the same disproved lies over and over again. The Joseph Goebbels playbook depends on you having complete control over the media, and you don't have that anymore. You don't have that in the world, and you don't even have it in the West anymore because of social media. I mean, you have this complete fraud, Netanyahu, who is corruption incarnate, corruption with a comb over, talking like it's 2001 and he's president of the Bible Belt. Like every word you say just alienates people more. It's a disaster. Talking about people of the light and people of the dark and Amalek and what have you. The more you talk, the more you make Zionism look like some weird cult, which is what it is. Everyone in his cabinet says something more insane and more fanatical than the last one. You know, they're trying to outdo each other in being crazy, talking about dropping nuclear bombs on Gaza. The whole Israeli government, the whole Netanyahu government is a PR disaster. Hamas is the new Nazis. Everyone knows Gaza is the new Warsaw Ghetto. Hamas is the new slave rebellion. They're the new Mau Mau. They're an anti-colonialist movement against the last most persistent and most brutal manifestation of overt Western colonialism in the global South. And the more the Zionist propagandists lie, the more they fabricate, and then the more they continue to repeat the fabrications that have been proven to be fabrications, the more obvious it becomes even to Westerners that they're being lied to, and that they've been lied to for years. I mean, we're talking about Westerners, mind you, young people who have become already hyper aware of their country's colonizing history. These are young Westerners who have already been grappling with feelings of guilt over their past, over the past of the West, over the past of their ancestors, over the past of their countries, the United States, the UK, Europe, and so on. They're already feeling guilt about that, and they want to disassociate themselves from that past. You're not paying attention. I mean, when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, the Zionists really should have seen the writing on the wall. When you see young people in the West destroying statues and monuments of slave owners and colonizers, you should have taken the hint. Your whole country is a monument of colonization. It's a monument of colonialism. Your whole ideology. Young people in the West have learned how to recognize what European, American, Western, white supremacy, what apartheid and oppression, they've learned to recognize what that looks like. And it looks like Israel. I mean, you can say Israelis, but we all know that most of those IDF soldiers are Americans and Europeans mostly, dropping American bombs from American warplanes on the indigenous people of Palestine. It's blatant. And the more you try to demonize the Palestinians, the more you try to dehumanize the Palestinians in your propaganda, the more you try to dehumanize the people of Gaza, the more you just reveal and expose your colonizer, supremacist, racist mentality. And this is making young people in the West disgusted with you, disgusted with Israel, disgusted with Zionism, and it's making them disgusted with their own governments, because it's their own governments who are the ones that are financing, that are arming, that are sponsoring this hideous colonizer regime, colonialist regime, this barbaric state, this degenerate ideology, and they want nothing to do with it. I mean, didn't you learn anything from 2020, from the George Floyd protests, from Colin Kaepernick? If you saw Congress people at the state capitol taking a knee in 2020, where they should be falling on their faces in sajda in 2023, young people in the West are desperate to disavow the bloody history of their countries, the bloody history of their ancestors, and they're desperate to atone for the inhumanity of their ancestors, the inhumanity of their own country's histories. Well, they can't undo what their forefathers did, but they can see with their own eyes what their leaders today are supporting in Gaza against the Palestinians. They can see the carnage being committed against an innocent, oppressed indigenous population, doing right now what their forefathers did, doing right now the type of thing that their ancestors did that they wish had never happened, that they wish they could have stopped, but they couldn't stop because it was in the past. But now you're doing it today, and they can stop you. And that's exactly what more and more of them are trying to do. Well, you know, Western diplomats, embassy staff, consular staff, and so on, they sent a cable to their governments that say that because of their government support of genocide, they're losing the entire Arab world for at least a generation or two. They say they're losing the global South. And I'm telling you, you're losing your own young people as well, your own young people in the West. Actual hardcore, unthinking support for Israel among the populations in the West only exists in pockets now. And then it's only among older people, you know, people who've grown up with controlled media and indoctrination, older people whose only social media account is on maybe Facebook, if they're on social media at all, or maybe they're on Instagram just to share, you know, pictures of the tapioca pudding that they're having at the nursing home today. But young people, people who are being informed by independent media coverage, being informed by on-the-ground footage that's shot from mobile phone cameras inside of Gaza, young people who want to disassociate themselves, like I said, from Western crimes and from its criminal past. Why, of course, these people, these young generations in the West, of course they're pro-Palestinian, and very often bravely so. And again, this is for Muslims and non-Muslims. This isn't just a Muslim phenomenon. And I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to win them over with some narrative. You're not going to be able to win them over with just rhetoric. That's not going to work. This is not something that you can solve with a good press release, a good press statement. There's no damage control that's going to salvage Zionism. The only thing that's going to solve this now is action, is actually doing the right thing. The world today, and your own young people, like I said, your own young people, and the young people of the world, the people who constitute the future of even your own countries, and that's the populations of the global South and the young people in the West. Those are the future for your own countries. In the West, you rely on the populations of the global South for your future. Well, they're not going to be satisfied with anything less than Israel completely abandoning Zionism, completely abandoning political Judaism, abandoning colonialist extremism, and making real peace with the Palestinians. The worse you act now, the harder the conditions are going to be on Israel to repair the damage that they're doing today. The further you swing the pendulum on the side of violence and extremism, the further it's going to have to swing to the other side to make it right. That's just how it works. Just watch. Because of the severity of the violence, the severity of the bigotry and the oppression, the severity of the brutality, the atonement is going to be severe. Zionism is going to be put in the same file of history as Nazism and apartheid, and people in the future will find it hard to believe that anybody ever supported it. Westerners have no sense of proportion, generally. They always go back and forth between extremes. It's a constant fluctuation between binges and purges. They're bulimic about hate and violence. They gorge themselves on it for some period of time, and then they have a summer of love. They rape and sexually harass women, and then they have a Me Too movement where all women are saints and every word they say is treated as sacred. They go to extremes. If young people in the West, therefore, are going to determine the outcome and the fate of Zionism, then I don't doubt that it will quickly cross into anti-Jewish persecution. Because anyway, support for Zionism actually is nothing but camouflaged anti-Semitism anyway. So it's absolutely true that the West does harbor deep sentiments of hatred for the Jewish people, and anti-Zionism can easily turn into real anti-Semitism, because again, they have no sense of proportion or balance. No, the only hope for Jews, the only hope that Jews have is the Muslims, the Arabs. The only way for Israelis to escape a hard retribution from the West in the near future is to seek peace and reconciliation with the Muslim world. That's their only chance, because the West already has anti-Jewish hatred running in their veins, and they have for centuries. And because young people are recognizing Israel's crimes for what they are, and because, again, the function of Israel to the management of the global economic and political order, it has become obsolete now. The collective West is inevitably going to sour on Israel. That's inevitable. And it's already happening. So their only hope, the only hope of the Israelis, is the Muslim world. That's their only hope for survival in any form, is integration into the region and abandonment of the ideology of Jewish supremacy. They're going to need to stop being a Western colonial project and learn how to be a normal country. They're going to have to recognize, and they're going to have to acknowledge that they have essentially the same status in Palestine as whites in South Africa or in Zimbabwe. They're going to have to recognize that their claims of ownership and of authority are illegitimate, and they're going to have to acknowledge that they are immigrants to the Arab world. They're immigrants to the Middle East. And then they're going to have to just hope that they're allowed to transition from being invaders and occupiers to being guests, and hope that the Arab Muslim hospitality and the tradition of pardon and the tradition of magnanimity that was exemplified by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the conquest of Mecca and by Salah ad-Din at the liberation of Jerusalem, they're going to have to hope that that spirit of magnanimity will be extended to them even after their century of cruelty. So anyone who is urging the Zionists on today, the supporters of Zionism, anyone who's endorsing the genocidal violence of Israel right now, is truly an enemy to the Jewish people, because all you're doing is making it less likely that the Arabs and the Muslims will be magnanimous towards them, that they'll be magnanimous and that they will extend pardon towards them in any way, shape, or form when the inevitable abandonment of Israel comes by the West, because it is inevitable. So all you're doing, if you're supporting Zionism, all you're doing is ensuring that the reckoning will not be merciful.